Two men were playing a game of chess, and as they were talking, one man said, "I've had so many blessings in life, my faith, a wonderful family and friends, a good job, but one thing that bothers me is when people gossip about me. It's like when good things happen to me, they only have negative things to say. It's frustrating, and I often get depressed. I don't know why people say those hurtful things, and I can't see any good in it." Well, we've probably all been where this man is, puzzled at how we can have so many blessings in life, but then at certain times when negative things happen to us, it's like the blessings are gone. It's hard to see any good, and at times it can seem like God's abandoned us. In our first reading, we're presented with one of the oldest blessing formulas in Scripture. The blessing asks God for protection, grace, and peace. Three things that we should all ask God for in our own lives. Protection, it can be from physical harm, but more importantly, we should ask God for protection from spiritual harm. And what's needed for this is God's grace, so that we can overcome temptation and sin. And then it's peace that'll help us maintain calm in the chaos and storms of life. And it'll help us to see the blessings in both the good and the bad things that happen to us. I think we can all agree that it is easier to see blessings in the good things in life. It takes the spiritually minded person to recognize the blessings in the bad. Therese of Lisieux, I think Father Hood would really like me this weekend because I've been mentioning her a lot. But Therese of Lisieux, she once told a story about how someone in her convent left a little vase on the windowsill and it was found broken. Well, the mistress thought it was Therese's fault. She said she seemed very annoyed that I had left it there and told me to be more careful next time, adding that I have no idea at all of tidiness. Without saying a word, I kissed the ground and promised I would take more care in the future. Such little things like this cost me a great deal because I was so lacking in virtue, and I had to remind myself that it would all be made known on the day of judgment. Well, what Therese learned to do was to see the little misunderstandings, the inconveniences, and the lack of charity from others as opportunities that God was giving her to practice virtue. And I would argue that some of the bad things that happen to us are signs of God's love for us, because through them, He's helping us become saints. But to be sanctified by our difficulties and sufferings means that we need to have the right attitude or the right frame of mind. And I can think of no better person to help us with that than the Blessed Virgin Mary. Being the Mother of God means that in the order of grace, she's our mother too. And if you have a good mom, then you know that a mother would do anything for the well-being of her children. And Mary did this for us during her earthly life. Every time she said yes to God for His will to be accomplished in her life, she cooperated with Him for our salvation. But then she continues to do this from heaven. Think about all the apparitions of Mary, Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe. She continues to cooperate with God for our well-being to lead us to Him. Now, during her earthly life, like all of us, she had her high and low moments of joy and moments of trial and suffering. Think of how she must have felt when Jesus was left in the temple. Her and Joseph were with the caravan on their way back to Nazareth, and after 3 days they realized that their son was missing, and they found him in the temple. But you can imagine those 3 days, it was a time of worry and panic for her. I mean, in her mind, any number of things could have happened to Jesus. And so that was a low moment for her. But then the season of Christmas is a high moment. We're presented with what I would argue was the greatest joy of Mary's life, the birth of her son. And in today's gospel, we're brought back to Bethlehem. The shepherds arrive, and they reveal the message of the angel to Joseph and Mary. And we're told that Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. And this isn't the only time in Scripture where we hear about her reflecting on these things in her heart. In the finding in the temple, after Mary and Joseph confront Jesus and speak with him, we're told that Mary reflected on Jesus' words in her heart. And what this indicates to us is that in moments of joy and sorrow, Mary was attentive to the Lord. She was constantly reflecting on the mysteries of his life, and she remained close to him. And all of this helped her to see the blessings in both the good and the bad. For example, the blessings she saw in the birth of her son, that one's pretty obvious, but the blessing she saw in the death of her son was our salvation. I read somewhere that Mary's suffering shows the full extent of her motherhood. She didn't just bring life forth in the birth of her son, but she also offered it to God in the passion and death of her son. Giving birth is painful, and the bringing forth of spiritual life likewise requires sacrifice. Our first reaction sometimes can be to run from our crosses, but perhaps a better reaction would be to turn to Mary, our mother, and ask her for help. St. Alphonsus Liguori, he once prayed, "My most sweet lady, you who were innocent suffered with so much patience. My mother, I now ask your favor, not indeed to be delivered from my crosses, but to bear them with patience. For the love of Jesus, I ask you to obtain at least this grace for me from God." As our mother, Mary always wants to help us to see the blessings in both the good and bad. She's always directing us to her son. And even in moments of suffering, if we turn to her, she'll comfort us, and she'll help us to realize that those moments are only temporary, and that the grace in those moments is that God's always at work. Like a surgeon in surgery, he uses those trials and difficulties to purify us and make us something new. He's forming us into saints fit for the halls of heaven.